We have another wrestling reaction video from the Age of Wrestling. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to his channel. Link will be in the description. We have the definitive ECW Iceberg. Let's get straight into it.
Fanatics and connoisseurs to the adrenaline-fueled world of extreme wrestling as we plunge into the depths of the ECW Iceberg. Join us on a journey through the iconic moments, controversial figures, and hidden gems that define the extreme and sometimes dangerous legacy of extreme championship wrestling. From brutal battles to the hardcore revolutionary storytelling that pushed the boundaries of sports entertainment, prepare to uncover the layers of ECW's impact on professional wrestling history like never before. This is the ECW Iceberg.
Here we go.
And we're starting off at the tippity top of the iceberg, Tier 6, with our first entry on Tier 6 being the mass transit incident. New Jack is an ECW legend, and his hardcore antics have been well documented. New Jack had an...
I'm gonna keep it a sec with y'all, bro. My fault for pausing this early, but I'm gonna say this right now and quickly. If they told me I had to face New Jack in a wrestling match, I'm not showing up to work. I'm not showing up to work, bro. I've seen what this man has done, and I've seen the Dark Side of the Ring documentary. I'm not showing up to work. I'm sorry. I'm quitting. You can get my paycheck out the door. I'm not coming. Simple as that.
A knack for taking things too far, and perhaps the most infamous story of New Jack taking it too far was the mass transit incident. Let's jump back to 1996. The Gangsters were scheduled to face Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten at an ECW show. However, Rotten couldn't attend due to a last-minute family emergency, leaving Dudley without a partner. A rookie wrestler named Eric Koulos convinced ECW owner Paul Heyman to let him be Axel Rotten's replacement. What Heyman didn't know was Koulos lied about his age, telling Heyman that he was 21 when he was in fact only 17. His inexperience showed as Koulos, who wrestled under the name Mass Transit, approached New Jack backstage to talk about the match. Now, for those who may be unaware, wrestling is built on respect for the veterans, and an aspiring wrestler approaching an experienced pro with ideas for a match could be seen as disrespectful. Koulos asked New Jack if he could get some offense in and even put New Jack through a table. This made the high on coke New Jack irate, and he would seek revenge as soon as the match started. During the match, the Gangsters isolated Koulos, pummeling him with a variety of hardcore wrestling objects. New Jack would then legitimately cut the teenager on the forehead with a surgical scalpel, severing 2 of his arteries and causing Koulos to pass out from the pain. The boy's father tried confronting New Jack after the incident, but without success. New Jack was later sued by the Koulos family, but the case was dismissed after the true details of the case came to light. And up next we have Chris Benoit break Sabu's neck. What happened during Chris Benoit's final weekend of his life, where he took the lives of his wife, 7-year-old son, and himself, often overshadow everything that Benoit has done in wrestling. However, in the mid-90s, Chris Benoit wrestled for ECW, and in ECW, he injured Sabu very seriously. On November 5, 1994, Benoit wrestled Sabu, and during the match, he tossed Sabu through the air for a flapjack, and Sabu landed right on his head. Those who were there recoiled at the scene as it was evident that Sabu had broken his neck. Medical personnel rushed to Sabu to treat him, and later on at the hospital, it was confirmed that he had indeed suffered a broken neck. Benoit felt bad about this, but he wasn't allowed to forget the incident because Paul Heyman nicknamed Benoit the Canadian Crippler for this incident, and that was a nickname that stuck to Benoit for the rest of his life.
I mean, it's really a good thing that Sabu was able to recover as well, bro.
And up next we have Steve Austin.
One of the greatest high fives as well.
In the early 90s, Steve Austin wrestled for WCW, and even though he achieved some success in that company, he ultimately was booked very poorly and was unceremoniously fired by WCW in 1995. Seeing that Austin was a free agent, Paul Heyman decided to bring Steve Austin into ECW, and Heyman saw potential in Steve Austin that WCW couldn't see. Heyman was able to tap into Austin's anger from his WCW exit and allowed him free reign to cut a series of promos that were the beginnings of the Stone Cold Steve Austin character. Austin had a field day ripping apart Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, and WCW in general. The creative freedom Heyman allowed Austin reignited a fire inside of him. Heyman wanted to book Austin at the top of ECW, but he didn't stay long in ECW, as after just wrestling 2 matches for the promotion, WWE came calling, and so he signed with them. In WWE, the character that he started in ECW blossomed fully, as Stone Cold Steve Austin became a true megastar during the Attitude Era. And up next, you have Paul Heyman secretly being paid by Vince McMahon. ECW was in a unique position during the late 90s. On the surface, they were successful, but in reality, they constantly verged on bankruptcy. Paul Heyman managed to keep ECW afloat with the help of WWE's Vince McMahon. Jim Ross revealed that WWE sent monthly checks to Paul Heyman for $50,000. Paul Heyman himself confirmed this too and revealed that Vince McMahon also gave ECW multiple loans, with the biggest one being a $500,000 loan in the year 2000.
Dang.
Without all this money from Vince McMahon, ECW would have closed shop much earlier. This was all being done in the dark though, as ECW talent were unaware of Vince funding ECW. In hindsight, the signs were there all along, as Vince allowed several ECW talent to wrestle on Monday Night Raw, and even allowed ECW to promote their first pay-per-view on Raw. And up next you have Sandman died, was revived, and wrestled on the same night.
I'm sorry, what?
At an ECW event in Milwaukee in the year 2000, showrunner Tommy Dreamer was startled when a tearful, emotionally wrought Rhino arrived late at the taping. Dreamer took him aside to ask what was going on, and Rhino told him straight up that the Sandman had died of an overdose of the pain reliever Nubane. Rhino then told Dreamer that he was in the car alongside Little Guido and Bill Alfonso. Thinking quick on his feet, Tommy Dreamer hatched a plan, and the first part of that plan was to have Alfonso quickly dispose of the drugs. The second part of the plan was bringing Sandman to the hospital. They just threw him to the floor and said that they just found a guy sleeping outside and they think that he might be dying. Thankfully, this all worked as medics revived Sandman with an adrenaline needle to the heart. He then wrestled that very same night against Barry Windham. And up next we have the Brian Pillman debut.
Is that a smart plan? What in the... Yo!
In the mid-90s, Brian Pillman was wrestling for WCW and he developed his loose cannon gimmick. In order for him to develop his gimmick further,
father, right?
he convinced WCW president Eric Bischoff to fire him legitimately so that he could develop his gimmick on the independents and then return back to WCW. This saw Brian Pillman popping up in Philadelphia in front of an excited ECW crowd. At first, Pillman captivated the audience by running down Eric Bischoff as a glorified errand boy. He then turned on the crowd in a complete 180 and began insulting their collective smart mark badge through his demented grin. He then threatened to urinate in the ring, which prompted Heyman, Shane Douglas, and others to intercede. Finally, the entire act of complex performance art ended with Pillman dragging a fan that was a plant into the ring and stabbing him with a fork. Words alone cannot do the entire bizarre scene justice. And up next we have Kane Dewey.
What?
Mick Foley used to wrestle for ECW in the mid-90s under the name Cactus Jack.
Yeah, we know how
One night a
Mick
fan had
was
asked
back in the day.
Foley for and received permission to make a sign that read Kane Dewey. Foley didn't think anything of it and kind of thought it was pretty cool. It was actually his wife Colette who was a little bit upset and maybe a little bit disturbed by the imagination of this ECW fan to write a sign asking for their young 3-year-old son to be caned. After Foley's wife mentioned it to him, the germ for an epic promo crept into Foley's brain. Foley spoke about how he was being slashed by Terry Funk via a glass bottle and all he wanted to do was squeal that he quits. But then he saw 2 words on a sign in the crowd that changed his life, that read Kane Dewey. Foley then launched into a tirade that any parent would relate to and maybe even shed a tear or two from. He lambasted the ECW fans for they had ripped out his heart, his soul, and anything he believed in. This promo really showed Mick Foley at his best and showed fans his captivating ability to tell compelling narratives. And up next we have Shane Douglas humiliates the NWA. From April 1992 until August of 1994, ECW was known as Eastern Championship Wrestling, and they were under the National Wrestling Alliance, NWA. The NWA was ailing, however, but they were set to hold a tournament in the ECW arena to crown a new NWA World Champion. ECW owner Todd Gordon had grown very wary of the NWA president and planned to secede from the NWA in a very tumultuous fashion. At this point, the Eastern Championship Wrestling champion was Shane Douglas, and he won the tournament to become the NWA
They haven't changed
World
the title
Champion,
yet?
defeating Too Cold Scorpio in the finals.
Title for?
His victory speech began graciously enough, talking about both his deceased father and the tradition that the NWA title stood for. After listing off some prior champions, Douglas's mood changed, and he threw down the NWA belt in an act of intentional disrespect. He declared the NWA dead and proclaimed
Rock
that
did the
being
same
the
thing,
ECW
too.
World Champion made him the real World Champion. This managed to piss the people at NWA off, and Eastern Championship Wrestling left the NWA. This was the birth of Extreme Championship Wrestling. And up next we have New Jack and Vic Grimes.
Oh, gosh.
New Jack and Vic Grimes had a
oh.
match at ECW's Living Dangerously pay-per-view in 2000. The pair agreed on finishing the match with a jump from a balcony and onto a table. When it came
Worst thing
time
to
to
ever do.
perform the dangerous stunt, Grimes wanted to back out at the last second, but New Jack wasn't having any of that on pay-per-view. So he dragged Vic Grimes down with him, causing Grimes to have no control over his fall and him landing on New Jack's head. New Jack suffered serious injuries, including a broken leg and a cracked skull. It led him to losing sight in his right eye and having headaches and insomnia for the rest of his life. After New Jack recovered, he wanted to get revenge on Vic Grimes, and so they had a scaffold match in another promotion. And in this match, New Jack broke from the script and legitimately shot Grimes with a taser before throwing him off the scaffold and sending him crashing to the ring 40 feet below.
He really tried
Vic
to take
Grimes
that man
escaped this
away.
with very minimal injuries due to the tables below, but New Jack had the genuine intention to kill Vic Grimes. And up next we have Tommy
He
Dreamer
didn't get no
almost
jail time
kills
for
Paul
that either.
Heyman at WrestleMania 17. After
I don't know
ECW
about
folded
this one.
in 2001, one of the company's top stars, Tommy Dreamer, went into a deep depression. He stuck with the promotion through the good times and bad, and had even invested all of his money and some of his parents' money in trying to keep it all afloat. When he saw that his former boss, Paul Heyman, was employed by WWE, Dreamer went into a mental tailspin. Dreamer had turned down a $750,000 a year contract with WCW to stay loyal to Paul and ECW, but clearly that wasn't reciprocal from Paul's part. What finally put Tommy over the top was getting an offer to appear at WrestleMania 17, only for the offer to get pulled at the last minute. Dreamer, who was unemployed and had to move back to his parents' house, finally snapped. He purchased a gun and planned to make his WrestleMania debut, whether he was invited or not. According to Dreamer, his plan was to show up at the Houston Astrodome and murder Paul Heyman by shooting him in the back of the head while he was on commentary. He would then turn the gun on himself and commit suicide. Thankfully, before the event, Jim Ross called Tommy and offered him a job with WWE. Dreamer was able to snap out of his depression and realized he narrowly avoided disaster. And now we're moving down the
Jim Ross?
iceberg into the 5th tier,
Oh my
with our
goodness.
first entry on the 5th tier
Jim Ross
being
came in clutch.
Sandman Crucified. One of the most insane moments in ECW history has to be the crucifixion angle between Raven and the Sandman in 1996. The story itself began with Sandman's wife and son defecting to Raven after the latter won the ECW championship. Raven got Sandman's son to forsake his own father and follow in his footsteps as he unleashed a barrel of psychological abuse to the Sandman. During the midst of this heated feud, the Sandman and his son eventually made their way back to each other after Sandman's son helped his father out during a match. However, this feel-good moment didn't last long as Raven showed up with his flock and smashed a Singapore cane into Sandman's head. Following this, flock members Blue Meanie and Stevie Richards fastened Sandman to a wooden cross and carried him out of the arena. Fans who were Christians didn't take too kindly to this, and there was a lot of backlash towards this angle. The backlash was so severe that it led Raven to issue a half-hearted apology for offending Christian fans' religious sentiments. And up next we have Kurt Angle.
Yeah, that is definitely one crazy thing to do. Definitely. And imagine if he did that now. I feel like if he did that now, that company would have been gone for. It would have not been up ever again.
It's kind of a continuation of the last one. Kurt Angle became a big name following his gold medal win at the Olympics, and in 1996 he got a $500,000 a year deal from WWE, of which he turned down because he really didn't understand pro wrestling very well. Interestingly, while Angle had turned down the chance to go to WWE, he would end up making an appearance on ECW that same year. Shane Douglas knew a friend of Angle and approached him to make an appearance on ECW television, and he told Angle that Paul Heyman's show was more like an amateur-style wrestling. And so the babyface Kurt Angle made an appearance in ECW in 1996, hopping in the ring for a little bit and doing some commentary. However, on this very same show that he was on, the Sandman crucifixion angle happened, and this turned Kurt Angle off completely, and he went to Paul Heyman and demanded that the show was not aired with him on it, or else Angle would sue him. Kurt Angle also told Paul Heyman to never call him back, and he left the building. And up next we have Devon, You Don't Hit a Woman. This incident that happened on May 30, 1998 stands still as one of the craziest acts in wrestling history. In an angle, the Dudley Boys beat and handcuffed Tommy Dreamer to the ropes. Bubba Ray and Devon Dudley were then about to smash Dreamer's face with a chair when ECW women's star Beulah came out and begged the Dudley Boys to leave Dreamer alone. They acquiesced, but only for Devon to snatch her up instead, and it looked like he was about to hurt her. Bubba then briefly stopped his brother, and he told him that you don't hit a woman, you break her neck. They then delivered a 3D on Beulah, and they kayfabe broke her neck, and they let Tommy Dreamer know that her blood is on his hands. This whole incident rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because domestic violence is a very real thing. And up next we have Terry Funk vs. Sabu at Born to Be Wired 1997. Terry Funk and Sabu met at Born to Be Wired.
What in the freaking world? Dog, that's sad.
1997, with the 53-year-old Funk defending his ECW championship against Sabu inside a deadly variation of a wrestling ring, with the ropes replaced by barbed wire. The results were brutal, with both wrestlers coming close to having their careers ended that night as the unforgivable wire tore through human flesh. The most gruesome moment of the night came when Sabu had one of his biceps torn.
Yeah, I don't understand, like, if you go for an Irish whip to the wire and you get stuck in that, how do you get out without getting cut? Like, regardless, you're going to get cut regardless.
Open by the barbed wire and ended up taping it back together with duct tape to finish the match. The end of the match saw both wrestlers tangled in a heap of barbed wires, requiring bolt cutters to cut them free, with Funk especially close to getting blinded.
How do you get
and up next
out of
we have
that?
Tommy Dreamer takes 10 lashes. In 1994, Tommy Dreamer was the ECW equivalent of mid-2010's Roman Reigns, a push wrestler that fans had zero interest in rooting for. At the time, Dreamer was a pretty boy, and his friendly, nice guy demeanor was a turn-off for the ECW crowd. Paul Heyman then came up with an idea to get Tommy Dreamer over, and all that it required was some sacrifice. Tommy Dreamer lost the match to the then heel Sandman, in which the loser would have to submit themselves to 10 lashes with a Singapore cane. Some fans delighted at the idea of Dreamer being beaten bloody, but something special happened. In one of the most disquieting scenes in wrestling history, Dreamer took his beating like a man, refusing offers from Nancy Woman Sullivan, who was Sandman's valet, to escape the beating by kissing her feet in gratitude. He refused and took all 10 skin-ripping blows with the Singapore cane, then defiantly asked an unnerved Sandman at the end, "Is that all you got?" This showed the ECW audience that Tommy Dreamer had some serious balls, and afterwards Tommy Dreamer became a fan favorite. And up next we have fans collapse the ring. In the early years of ECW, there was one incident that kick-started the whole fan involvement aspect of ECW, and the moment did not end so well.
I think I remember
The Public Enemy had just made their ECW debut and emerged victorious. Eager to celebrate, they did so but wanted to share the moment with their fans, so they invited the crowd into the ring. An uncapped number of fans piled into the ring screaming, dancing and celebrating, and consequently the ring collapsed. It was truly a crazy scene, but one which miraculously didn't result in any injuries for the fans. And up next we have Paul Heyman shoots on TNN.
Oh, what the
One
world?
major aspect of ECW's downfall could come from their horrible television deal with TNN before they became Spike TV.
Oh, y'all don't know about this.
ECW was getting very little promotion and hype from
I love
TNN
that
when they
freaking
first
logo,
premiered
dog.
in 1999, and TNN constantly censored their content. And as time went on, it was very clear that ECW hated TNN, as there was constant jabs at TNN from ECW. However, it all came to head on June 2, 2000, when ECW owner Paul Heyman decided that he had had enough, and he declared war on TNN in a shoot promo. He criticized TNN for giving them very little promotion and censoring them, and he also goaded TNN to kick them off the network. Paul Heyman also criticized TNN for being in talks with WWE to have WWE on their network. And around the time Raw is War debuted on TNN, ECW was officially kicked off the network. This was one of the most legendary moments of ECW's run. And up next we have Sandman dropping acid before a pay-per-view. Before ECW's 1997 November to Remember pay-per-view, the Sandman dropped 2 tabs of acid. He had a match with Sabu, but Sandman was tripping balls. The Sandman was tripping so much that he thought Sabu was Godzilla, and he kept calling him a lizard during the bout. This match was not the match for someone to take acid before, as it was a very dangerous match. Sabu basically had to fight for his life against a man who was on acid. And up next we have Sabu no-shows. In 1995, Sabu was simultaneously a popular staple in ECW as well as one in Japan. While wrestling for New Japan Pro Wrestling, Sabu made 4 to 5 times more than he would in a match in ECW. In April of 1995, Sabu was booked to take part in the main event of ECW's big show, 308 Dance, but there was an unfortunate conflict. Sabu was also booked for a date with New Japan Pro Wrestling at the same time, but he claimed that he could hop on a plane after the Japan show and fly out to Philly, which was physically impossible, seeing that he only arrived in Philadelphia 10 hours after the event had concluded. Because Sabu was not there, Paul Heyman replaced him with Rick Steiner, and he was so angry that he came out to the audience to inform the fans that he was firing Sabu via a vicious promo. Sabu and Heyman eventually patched things up, and Heyman brought Sabu back later that same year. And up next we have the chair shot heard around the world. Raven and Tommy Dreamer's feud was one of the greatest feuds in ECW history. Their feud dated back to their childhood in kayfabe, and it invested fans heavily. Early on during their feud, they had a segment in which Tommy Dreamer handcuffed Raven to a cage and smashed a steel chair on his head. This steel chair shot was so vicious that it ended up breaking the chair. This chair shot got so famous that it was considered the chair shot heard around the world, and it helped to catapult their feud to new levels. This happened in 1995 before the Attitude Era, so seeing extremely stiff chair shots like that was new to fans. Tommy Dreamer has even said in interviews that he feels bad that he gave Raven such a stiff chair shot because he feels that the chair shot contributed to Raven's health issues later on in his life. And up next we have the ECW Arena Fire.
And that's the reason why that we don't get chair shots nowadays, for real.
In 1995, ECW was holding an event at the ECW Arena in Philadelphia. The event gained infamy in the match between Cactus Jack and Tommy Dreamer. In this match, there was a stunt involving a steel chair wrapped in a towel that was set on fire, and it ended up engulfing Terry Funk and a fan in flames, causing major panic among those in attendance that led to a stampede. No footage of the incident has ever been publicly released, with ECW claiming during a litigation case involving the injured fan that the tape was accidentally erased the following week. If it still exists, it is likely within WWE's tape library, as WWE purchased ECW's assets and its tape library in 2003. However, given the context of the incident, it is highly unlikely that it will end up on the WWE network. And now we're moving down the iceberg into
Do y'all think we ever gonna get like a fire table spot anymore in the WWE low-key chat? When the last time we actually seen something that was like around fire? I think it was like the Firefly Funhouse, the the Inferno match, I believe, or something like that. But I don't really think now how like strict stuff is nowadays we're gonna get stuff like that, because there's a lot of kids that watch wrestling, so I really don't know. But it could happen though.
With our first entry on Tier 4 being the Dudley Boys almost started riot.
Yeah, it's not necessary.
At ECW's Heatwave 1999, the Dudley Boys were scheduled to defend their ECW Tag Team Championships against Spike Dudley and Balls Mahoney. But the drama of this night starts before the match even happens. The Dudley Boys were irate, making their way down to the ring. And in the ring, Devon Dudley told the crowd to shut the F up before handing the mic to Bubba Ray. Bubba's portion of the promo is particularly barbed and launches insults at the Crowd City, a man in a Hawaiian t-shirt, a mother and a daughter pairing, and a woman that he refers to as a skankosaurus. Bubba Ray then dares the crowd to attack him, and when he sees a rowdy big guy in the front row, Bubba smells blood in the water. Bubba gets out of the ring, gets right in the audience member's face, and dares the guy to hit him. The guy in the front row just mouths off, but Bubba wasn't done yet. He grabs a drink from a woman in the front row, and he throws it in the guy's face. Then the woman he stole the drink from starts shouting at Bubba and then literally spits in his face, to which Bubba calls her a $5 whore. Things were tipping over at a fast rate, and the crowd were getting rowdier and rowdier to the point where a riot almost started. Luckily a riot didn't start, and they had their match as planned. And up next we have fans S.A., Francine, and Beulah. Former ECW valet Francine and Beulah got into a catfight that got completely out of control. According to Francine, the two women were having a scripted catfight when they decided to go over the safety railing and into the crowd. Francine said that some fans decided to take it upon themselves to start groping the women and taking articles of their clothing. Francine said her and Beulah tried their best to keep kayfabe, but realized they were being seriously violated and were in danger. Luckily, ECW security team got to them and rushed them to the backstage area. Francine said that she would never do that spot again, and she lost a lot of respect for some of ECW's fan base for a time. And up next we have the Sandman whips out a member in the middle of the ring. During the dying days of ECW back in 2000, the Sandman was scheduled for a match at an untelevised house show. Before the match even started, Sandman entered the ring in absolutely no shape to compete. From all accounts, the Sandman was completely drunk and acted inappropriately. When he came to the ring,
let's be honest, bro. When is never like I'm gonna keep it aside, chat. I really think that every time Sandman got into the ring, this man was drunk. Man would come out with a kendo stick in his left hand, a beer in his left hand, drink that joint up, you know what I'm saying, chuck a little bit, smack his head 5 times, drink another beer, smack his side of his head, another 5 times, have blood gushing all down his head. When is he not drunk, bro?
Sandman got on the microphone and cut a garbled, incoherent promo that nobody could understand. He then attempted to grab female wrestler Jazz and allegedly started to grope her in front of the live crowd. Jazz was apparently able to get away from the Sandman's grip and left the ring. The Sandman didn't stop there though, as he began dropping his pants and exposing his member in between his legs to the fans in attendance. Tommy Dreamer, who was responsible for booking the show, ran into the ring and was able to convince the Sandman to return backstage with him. Luckily for ECW, Jazz didn't file any charges against the Sandman or the company. Paul Heyman
I think I remember her. Wasn't she the one where, hold on a second, I'm gonna find a clip. I think I know who Jazz is. Hold on a second. Oh, this is her!
TNA stands for talent and ability. Unlike any other...
Dog! That's her. Okay, run that back.
For ECW, Jazz didn't file any charges against the Sandman or the company. Paul Heyman did, however, suspend the Sandman without pay for about 3 weeks. And up next we have RVD and Taz backstage fight. During the peak days of ECW in the 90s, wrestler Taz had a tough guy reputation in the locker room. He was not only a wrestler, but also a hard-nosed trainer to several up-and-coming ECW talents. Taz was also one of the promotion's top guys, so he seemed virtually untouchable. Taz had apparently criticized the wrestling style of Rob Van Dam, another one of ECW's top stars. Taz felt that he was reckless inside the ring and allegedly said that if RVD ever got in the ring with him, he'd shoot on him. Word got back to Van Dam about what Taz had said, and he didn't take it so well. RVD then walked up to Taz backstage and asked Taz to pick a hand. Confused by what RVD was asking him, Taz was about to ask Van Dam to repeat himself, but before he could ask, RVD open-hand slapped Taz across his face. RVD then repeated himself, pick a hand, and then slapped Taz a second time.
So is Taz the reason why AEW has the FTW championship? Is he the reason why that? I did not know that. Oh.
With his other hand. A few wrestlers then got between Taz and RVD before it got any worse, and RVD casually walked away. And up next we have Bruce from Connecticut. WWE Livewire was a WWE talk show in the 90s, and the format of the show meant that pretty much anything could happen. When Vince McMahon appeared on the show, that was absolutely true. One of the show's phone screeners patched through a call from Bruce from Connecticut to pose a question to the WWE chairman. It became quite clear that it wasn't a native of the Constitution state when the caller launched into a tirade, accusing McMahon of stealing ideas and talents from ECW. Everyone realized rather easily that Paul Heyman was trying to hijack the broadcast to promote the renegade ECW. Paul Heyman challenged Vince McMahon to suggest to his fans that they watch ECW. And up next we have Sonny and Chris Candido. The tumultuous relationship between Chris Candido and Sonny has been well documented. Sonny carried on numerous affairs with other wrestlers while Candido seemingly remained oblivious and quiet about the love of his life cheating on him. Many of his friends within the business felt that Chris turned to drugs to ease the pain and humiliation of what he was going through on a daily basis. With that said, it was revealed by Chris's brother, Johnny, that Chris wasn't so innocent either. While Chris and Tammy were working for ECW, Candido allegedly had an affair with another valet from that promotion. According to his brother, Candido messed around with Chastity, who at the time was a valet for Jason Knight and Justin Credible. Apparently, Chris finally snapped and decided to fool around behind Tammy's back. Johnny said that the affair was very low-key and not too many people knew about it, including Sonny herself. And up next we have staging robberies. It's well known that Paul Heyman could go weeks without paying wrestlers due to his bad business sense. It meant several wrestlers learned to penny pinch on the road to save on costs. There's a multitude of stories involving Raven, Tommy Dreamer and the Dudleys of having innovative ways of getting out of hotel bills. Because they didn't have money and weren't getting paid, they would ransack their hotel room and then claim that all their money was stolen. And up next we have Scott Hall.
Is that kind of a smart thing to do though?
While ECW was holding a show in Florida, PJ Polanco invited his good friend Scott Hall backstage to visit. Hall, who was still wrestling for WCW, was not quite welcome in the dressing room with open arms. That was especially the case with ECW faction, the Triple Threat, which consisted of Shane Douglas, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Chris Candido. It wasn't so much that Hall was with the promotion at the time, but rather the way he and his other clique members treated all three of the Triple Threat while working for the WWF years prior. Shane Douglas was especially upset seeing Scott Hall backstage and made it known immediately. Douglas started yelling and screaming at Hall and charged the bad guy, only to be held back by Candido and Bigelow. According to Bigelow, Hall was drunk or high when he came into the back and wanted to kick his ass himself, but feared that Paul Heyman would not approve of his actions. Bigelow stated that all Hall had to do was apologize for the way that he and the clique treated all of them, but Scott just left and nothing was settled at the time. And up next we have Shane Douglas almost causes a riot. In mid-1996, Shane Douglas severely injured a wrestler called Pitbull No. 1 with a botched finishing move, which snapped his opponent's neck. After Shane Douglas broke Pitbull No. 1's neck, he faced Pitbull No. 1's tag team partner Pitbull No. 2 in a one-on-one match, with Pitbull No. 1 at ringside, with his neck carefully held together in a metal harness. Halfway into the match, with Shane Douglas gaining control, Pitbull 1 threw in the towel on behalf of his partner, possibly with his own horrific injury fresh in his mind. This angered Shane Douglas. Douglas then turned his attention to Pitbull No. 1, grabbing his metal neck harness and throwing him to the ground. Shane Douglas's despicable actions towards a man with a broken neck inflamed the crowd and almost caused a riot, causing Douglas to need protection to get to his car after the show was over. And up next we have Mike Awesome vs Taz. For all the talk of war between AEW and WWE, they have nothing on the Monday Night Wars of the mid-90s between WWE and WCW.
Facts.
Sprinkle some ECW in there too for good measure. For nearly 5 years, the three companies waged war with each other. On one fateful night, all three promotions had their legal teams find a way to converge on the Forbidden Door, when a contracted WCW wrestler defended the ECW title against a contracted WWE wrestler inside an ECW arena. In late 1999, Taz had left ECW and signed a contract for WWE, and Mike Awesome left ECW and signed for WCW while being the ECW World Champion. Paul Heyman arranged that Taz face off against Mike Awesome for the ECW World Championship, and Taz won the match. This is the real Forbidden Door. And now we're moving down the iceberg into the third tier, with our first entry on the third tier being New Jack messes up a Dudley. During an ECW house show back in 1995, the gangsters of New Jack and Mustafa Saeed took on the Dudleys back in 1995.
I heard about this guy. I heard about this guy was crazy as well. But he wasn't crazy as New Jack though, cause that man was like, he would like smoke pencil shavings and like do like hard drugs and stuff like that. I heard that man was crazy.
The gangsters of New Jack and Mustafa Saeed took on the Dudleys, consisting of Dances with Dudley and Dudley Dudley. The match saw all four wrestlers working extra stiff, so much so that New Jack accidentally broke Dances with Dudley's nose. Dances with Dudley responded by stiffing New Jack a few times as a receipt. After the match ended, the gangsters went to the back first, followed by the Dudleys. When Dances with Dudley came out from the curtain, New Jack cracked him on the back of the head with a club. That sparked a full-out brawl between Dances and New Jack that took several wrestlers to pull them apart. One of these wrestlers was Mikey Whipwreck, who injured himself in the melee. Dances with Dudley needed several stitches in the back of his head, and Whipwreck continued to work hurt. Paul Heyman was urged to fire New Jack on the spot, but relented because the gangsters were booked for some bigger advertised matches down the line. And up next we have the Sunny interview. When Sunny debuted for ECW, she looked quite attractive, but something did look noticeably off. Even Dave Meltzer said on the Wrestling Observer newsletter that it looked like she hadn't slept in a week. It was clear that she was battling many demons. And on the October 8th, 1999 edition of ECW on TNN, she had a shoot interview that broadcast where she aired all of her troubles. The interview brought Sunny to tears after talking about some difficult topics, including how she handled her fame in WWE, while also discussing the death of her aunt when she was 16. She also talked about how she had been struggling with prescription drugs and alcohol. Looking back at this interview, it's especially eerie considering the path that Sunny has gone down, as she faced substance abuse for years and years after this interview. It all came to a head in 2022 when she was driving under the influence of alcohol and marijuana, and she crashed into a 75-year-old man's car, thus killing him in the process. She was sentenced to 17 years in jail for this offense. And up next we have Sandman almost gets Francine arrested. While on the road traveling to an ECW show, about 8 wrestlers and personnel decided to split a large taxi van to take them to the hotel. On this taxi van were the Sandman and Francine. The driver of the van was of Indian descent. The Sandman allegedly started making racist jokes at the expense of the driver. The driver took offense to the alleged racist comments and drove the van back to the airport.
Skibbity toilet will be mine, ye Ohio town. Yeah, diamonds to mine. I'm on that big Sigma grind, worried about imposters. I'm way too sus. Yeah, for Sigma trust.
Nigga, you crying. Shut up.
Sandman and the driver then began having a verbal altercation. The driver then called the police, which prompted the Sandman to approach manager Francine and ask her to hide some drugs he was carrying with him. Francine agreed and hid the drugs in her bra and panties. When the police arrived, they brought a canine with them. Francine saw the dog and understandably panicked. The Sandman explained to the cops that they were all wrestlers trying to get to a show. The cops then decided to end the situation by having the wrestlers call for another cab. They put the dog back in the police vehicle, and when the new cab arrived, Francine quickly ran to the other cab with Sandman's drugs still on her. Francine recalled the incident, saying she nearly crapped on herself, fearing she would be arrested for the drugs. And up next we have Just Incredible Coke. At the height of Just Incredible's career, he was a main event talent that was the reigning ECW champion. Credible says that he was making a lot of money by ECW standards and even had his own dressing room. Credible admits that this was the height of his drug addiction. He says that almost every time he was introduced to the ring as ECW champion, he would do several lines of coke to get himself hyped up for his matches. He said that because he had his own dressing room, he would leave mounds of coke out in the open. He felt secure that nobody would dare walk in there and steal his stash. And up next we have Taz vs Green Day.
And no one
Back
did?
in 1993, while on the road for Eastern Championship Wrestling, Taz went to a motel to chill out and relax while his fellow wrestlers went out to drink. When Taz went to the lobby to get ice, a van pulled up with what looked like a bunch of young, drunk kids. The group of young men stumbled into the hotel and started giving the receptionist a hard time, yelling and berating her. Having seen enough, Taz confronted the group of drunks and asked what their problem was. One of them got into Taz's face and asked them if there was a problem. Tommy Dreamer walked in around that time and saw Taz outnumbered and immediately jumped in, and he and Taz started pushing and shoving the drunks. The local police were called and they were able to break up the wrestlers and drunk kids before an all-out brawl broke out. Not long after the confrontation, Taz was flipping through channels and turned to MTV. He immediately recognized one of the people being interviewed on MTV as someone who he and Dreamer confronted earlier in the week. It turned out to be the rock band Green Day. And up next we have XPW invades ECW. In July of 2000, ECW held a pay-per-view called Heatwave.
Isn't XPW still a thing though now? Now that I really think about it. Cause I think like last year I had seen a clip on XPW Twitter or something like that. Yo, Rocky, appreciate the raid, gang. Appreciate that, bro. Hope you had a good shit, gang. I saw that XPW had like a clip where they had a needle and it was going through their area. You feel what I'm saying? Are they still a thing though?
In Los Angeles, California. It just so happened to be the home base of ECW's rival XPW, owned by adult video maker Rob Black.
I think they
Members of
ECW,
XPW bought ringside tickets to the show in an effort to distract attention from the ECW event. Before the main event of the evening, XPW valet / porn star Christy Mist took off her top, which enraged ECW valet Francine. As Atlas security was trying to restore order, Mist allegedly put her hands on Francine. This led to the ECW locker room coming down to the ring and confronting all the XPW wrestlers that were ringside. The XPW guys and gals were escorted out of the building, but not before a few punches were thrown by each side. And up next we have Balls Mahoney arrest. During his ECW days, the late Balls Mahoney recalled a time when he was wrestling in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mahoney readily admitted he drank heavily. In order to continue to feel buzzed, Balls started taking a bunch of pills. By the time Balls Mahoney got to a local eatery, he was completely zoned out from the beers and pills. A fan noticed who Balls was and approached the wrestler to ask for an autograph. Balls allegedly ignored the fan, and feeling slighted, the fan started calling Balls names. That is when Balls allegedly grabbed the fan and assaulted him. The local police were called and handcuffed Mahoney. Tommy Dreamer recalled Balls sitting on the side of the street crying to the police, begging them not to put him in jail. Dreamer said that Balls pleaded with the cops that he was a pro wrestler and that he was in the main event for a big show and needed to be there. Dreamer said that the cops eventually released Balls from their custody and told Dreamer that he would be released with just a warning. And up next we have the Sandman attacks Jimmy Snuka. During a WWE house show in Philadelphia in 1989, An overzealous fan leaned over the guardrail and smacked Jimmy Superfly Snooker. Superfly got so angry, he actually jumped the guardrail and chased the fan. Absolutely terrified for his life, the fan ran past security and backstage. Once backstage, the fan realized he made a big mistake. He was soon met by Gorilla Monsoon, who grabbed the fan and pummeled him. Monsoon then had security throw the fan outside. The overzealous fan in question was named Jim Fullington, the future ECW legend known as the Sandman. And up next we have Missy Hyatt convinces Paul Varlins to put Taz over. Paul Varlins was an American professional mixed martial artist, and he competed in the UFC from 1995 to 1996. Not satisfied with just mixed martial arts, he then made a jump to wrestling, and ECW was his first and last experience with wrestling. Paul Heyman wanted Varlins to work with Taz and put Taz over, but Varlins refused this, and the reasoning for this was because he stood at 6'8" and Taz was 5'9". However, Missy Hyatt managed to get into Varlins' mind, and she convinced him that if he agreed to lose to Taz, then she would perform fellatio on him afterwards. So then on 22 June 1996 at ECW's hardcore event, the 6'8" Paul Varlins was choked out by the 5'9" Taz in what was promoted as a shoot fight. Varlins had held up his end of the deal, but when he went to Missy Hyatt to get some head, Hyatt refused, saying that she does not blow jobbers. Ouch. Subsequently, Varlins became irrational and absolutely destroyed the locker room. And up next we have...
So he really did that for nothing though. Dang.
Shane Douglas attacks 16-year-old fangirl. In October of 1997, Shane Douglas and his valet Francine were walking to the ring for a match in ECW. Before Douglas could get into the ring, he got into a physical altercation with a female fan. The female fan was a 16-year-old who blew cigarette smoke at Shane, and then he turned around and he spit at her.
Why was she smoking at 16? I mean, I gotta realize it is back in the day, so back in the day people were doing some crazy stuff.
Then spat at him back, and that's when Douglas punched her in her ribs and in the face. She was left with a few bruises, and the police were called and they arrested Shane Douglas on assault charges. Shane Douglas pled not guilty to the assault charges, claiming that the fan was the instigator in the incident. And now we're moving down the iceberg into the second tier, with our first entry on the second tier being James Mitchell almost loses a hand. In the year 2000, ECW manager, the Sinister Minister James Mitchell, was severely injured at an ECW show. James Mitchell was backstage practicing for his appearance later on in the show, working with an apparatus that would shoot fire. The device misfired and Mitchell suffered serious burns and cuts on his left hand, and a piece of shrapnel went into his stomach. He then had to undergo surgery to remove the shrapnel from his stomach, and luckily the shrapnel didn't strike any major organs. James Mitchell suffered major burns on his hands and abdomen, and he lost 2 tips of his fingers and had nerve damage. James Mitchell said that he practiced with the thing at home hundreds of times and that it was just a freak accident, but he was lucky to escape with his life. ECW owner Paul Heyman was criticized when airing footage of Mitchell being treated backstage by medical personnel and claiming the damage was inflicted by the full-blooded Italians who were trying to cut his fingers off. And up next we have Sonny steals Raven's drugs. One night before an ECW show, Raven brought a full bottle of the liquid drug, GHB, into the locker room. He set the bottle down and went to the bathroom, and when he returned, he noticed that some of the content in the bottle was gone. Raven started asking other wrestlers if they stole some of his drug with negative results. That is until he spotted Sonny passed out in a chair. She had urinated on herself and Raven knew immediately she was the culprit. Raven went to Sonny's boyfriend, Chris Candido, and told him what she had did, and Candido tried to revive her but with no luck. According to Raven, Candido started delivering Ric Flair style chops to her chest and screaming woo to try and wake her up. He did this a number of times while he and Raven were hysterically laughing. And up next we have the Sandman beaten up by Ron and Don Harris. Back in the mid to late 90s in ECW, the Harris twins of Ron and Don Harris were involved in a match that was supposed to feature the Sandman. The problem was, the Sandman missed his cue because he was too busy getting drunk backstage. The match continued without Sandman, but eventually Sandman made his way to the ring, apparently completely wasted. Sandman came in as he usually does, swinging his Singapore cane at anybody within striking distance of him. During the melee inside the ring, a drunk Sandman recklessly began swinging his cane and struck Don Harris in the back of the head, stunning him. Don's brother Ron got pissed off, and after seeing his brother legitimately hurt, he started pummeling Sandman with legit punches and kicks to the face. Once Don shook off his pain, he joined in on the beating of Sandman. Afterwards, the Harris twins left an unconscious Sandman laying in the ring. And up next we have the Posse's antics with women. There was a group of friends well known in ECW circles simply called the Posse. The Posse consisted of the Sandman, Too Cold Scorpio, Bill Alfonso, and the then ECW owner, Todd Gordon. They would often get together after shows and party hard. This included drinking, doing various drugs, and sleeping with a number of women both separately and in groups. The Posse made sure that whenever they were together in hotels that they book rooms next to each other with adjoining doors for easy access back and forth. Scorpio, Todd Gordon, and Bill Alfonso were admittedly all addicted to crack cocaine and made sure it was available for them to party with. Gordon told a story of how they once got bored of fornicating and decided to call an escort service to humiliate a woman. They blindfolded her, put a gag in her mouth, and tied her hands and feet with duct tape. She was ordered not to move from the spot she was in. Gordon then sprinkled baby powder all over the floor to see if she made any tracks and disobeyed their demands. They then all left the hotel to go drinking at the bar for hours. And up next we have the Taz arrest. In 1998, Taz got into some legal trouble. At this time he was resting for ECW and he went to the Moon Beach tanning salon to get a tan. While there, he inexplicably asked a 15-year-old girl who was working at the salon to lift her shirt and show him her breasts. He then exposed his private parts to the girl in question. The police were called and they arrested Taz. Taz, however, couldn't pay the $10,000 bond and he was forced to sit in a jail cell. It's not known the outcome of this arrest, but seeing how he never missed any significant time out of his career in ECW in 1998 or 1999, one must conclude that he wasn't given a harsh sentence or was perhaps proven innocent of the charges.
How?
And up next we have the New Jack and Junkyard Dog.
How though? If he did that now, that may be getting time.
Backstage fight. Before an independent show, the Junkyard Dog borrowed about $300 worth of weed from New Jack. The Junkyard Dog promised to pay New Jack back, but never did. Fast forward to ECW's WrestlePalooza 1998, and the Junkyard Dog was scheduled to be a part of the show. New Jack never forgot the money that was owed to him and demanded that the Junkyard Dog either pay up or don't bother showing up. Despite the threats, the Junkyard Dog did show up and allegedly started taunting New Jack backstage. The Junkyard Dog and New Jack had to be separated a few times, with ECW owner Paul Heyman begging New Jack to be on his best behavior. New Jack obliged, but still wanted the Junkyard Dog to pay him what was owed to him. The Junkyard Dog and New Jack continued to taunt each other, and that led to New Jack sucker punching the Junkyard Dog in the face and kneeing him in the groin.
Oh, dang.
This busted him open, but the Junkyard Dog also got a few punches in of his own. Later, when things cooled off a bit, the Junkyard Dog allegedly apologized and offered to book New Jack on a few indie shows he was booking in New Orleans.
Black eye.
New Jack basically told the Junkyard Dog to F off and pay him what he was owed. The situation was never fully resolved that night, and just a month later, the Junkyard Dog was killed in a car accident. And up next we have the body count match. The tag team's Bad Company featuring Tanaka and Paul Diamond and the Public Enemy featuring Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge were locked into a feud against each other and agreed to a match on the 7th December 1993 edition of Hardcore TV. The teams agreed upon a body count match. The stipulation would be that Pat Tanaka and Rocco Rock would wrestle in the ring, while their respected partners, Diamond and Grunge, would be locked in separate jail cells, and whoever won the match would be able to free their tag partner, and the loser would witness their partner's jail cell explode. And if there was no winner after 15 minutes, then both jail cells would explode.
What?
In the match, Tanaka picked up the victory via pinfall. This means that he should have been able to rescue his tag team partner Diamond from the explosion, but a malfunction happened and it was actually Diamond's cell that exploded. Ultimately, the explosion was deemed underwhelming though. According to Diamond, ECW's Paul Heyman was not given permission to utilize fireworks that would have created a bigger bang. Rather, paper was lit to create the smoke and a recording of an explosion was used for the sound. The poor quality finish led to outrage from the ECW crowd, leading to boos and chants of money back. Despite the poor explosion,
did they really want to see an explosion for real, bro? Do they really want to see that?
Was still forced to sell the effects of it, and he claimed that it was the most embarrassing situation he had ever been in. Because of the universally negative reception among the fans in attendance and ECW personnel, the match and the aftermath never aired on ECW television, despite being planned to air, and was never mentioned again. And up next we have the Sandman and Missy Hyatt. Missy Hyatt admitted to having a brief sexual fling with the Sandman while they were both working together in ECW. She says that it was all innocent at first, but Sandman was a big fan of her when she worked in other territories. He was shy and awkward around her, and she found that endearing about him. It wasn't until Sandman's real-life wife, Lori Fullington, got into the picture that things changed.
Oh no.
According to Missy, Lori was extremely jealous of Missy working with her husband and suspected the two were having an affair, of which they weren't. The Sandman's wife apparently went complaining to Paul Heyman about her husband working with Missy and demanded that they split up or she herself be added to the storylines. This upset Missy a great deal, and she decided that if Sandman's wife was already suspicious of her and Sandman, she might as well give her a real reason to be jealous. Missy claims that she and Sandman had sex twice, and both times Sandman was allegedly drunk and had a hard time getting it up. Missy said that she had no regrets about the affair. The Sandman and his wife would eventually divorce for various reasons. And up next we have Todd Gordon Moore.
Yeah, bro.
In the mid-90s, there was a mass
defection
defection of ECW talents to WCW, all orchestrated by an alleged mole within ECW, and the alleged mole was ECW president Todd Gordon. It all started in 1995, when ECW founder Todd Gordon sold majority interest in his promotion to the head booker Paul Heyman. Todd Gordon remained with the promotion for a couple of years in an on-air authority role. That's where things began to get murky. Apparently, during his last couple of years with ECW, Gordon was looking to get out of the business, as he had 2 small children that he wanted to spend more time with and was growing tired of the party-like atmosphere in ECW. Word then got out to Gordon that 2 of his close friends, Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge, aka the Public Enemy, were leaving ECW to sign with the WWF. Todd Gordon stepped in and convinced them that he could get them a better deal with WCW. Gordon had some connections in WCW's front office, including former ECW talent Kevin Sullivan. In the end, Gordon did in fact get Grunge and Rocco Rock a better deal. It was then that word got out what Gordon did, and other ECW wrestlers approached him to broker deals for them to go to WCW. Gordon agreed to do this, but only if it was kept extremely quiet and without Paul Heyman's knowledge. This led to many talents from ECW jumping ship to WCW. It allegedly all blew up when a Paul Heyman guy, Tommy Dreamer, heard a voicemail from WCW agent Terry Taylor to Todd Gordon. There's also word that Kevin Sullivan gave Heyman a heads up to what Gordon was attempting to do. The locker room was divided and finger pointing almost immediately began. Heyman sent out ultimatums to his staff and crew and fired Todd Gordon. And up next we have Raven busted with a 15-year-old.
Oh god.
During his days in ECW, Raven brought 3 girls back to his motel room. According to Raven, he had sex with 2 of the women while the other was a 15-year-old girl that just slept there. One of the 2 adult women were rumored to be ECW ring announcer Joel Gertner's wife. Regardless of who the 2 adult women really were, there was an issue of a 15-year-old in that same room. Police were called, and when they showed up to the room, Raven was naked and the underage girl was still in there with him. Raven was arrested, and after a few hours of questioning, the police determined that there was no real evidence of sexual misconduct with the teen, and he was subsequently released. As for the teenage girl, it turned out to be future wrestler / valet Becky Bayless, aka Cookie in TNA Wrestling.
Oh wow!
And now we're moving
Is that
on
not
to the
traumatized for her,
deepest
though?
and darkest part of the iceberg, Tier 1.
Oh yeah,
With our
facts.
first entry
Definitely,
in
Heyman
Tier
was a
1
menace.
being the Angel
Was a menace in
Amoroso and Tommy
ECW.
Dreamer
Once we get that
incident.
now,
In 1994,
He'll be
a tag
cancelled.
team match took place in ECW, pitting Cactus Jack and Tommy Dreamer versus the Sandman and Tommy Cairo. Before the match took place, the wrestlers went over how the match would unfold. Cairo's valet, Angel Amoroso, agreed to take a Singapore cane shot to her head to culminate the end of the match. She said that Tommy Dreamer approached her and requested that she not wear panties, to which Angel found highly suspicious. After the match took place, Angel received the cane shot and fell to the mat. That is when she claimed that Tommy Dreamer went off script and raised her legs and viciously caned her in her crotch. The cane shot ripped open her private part and she started bleeding profusely. Angry that the spot was not agreed upon by her, Angel confronted Dreamer, who allegedly was unsympathetic and refused to apologize. Angel then went to Paul Heyman to complain, and Heyman was less than accommodating to her. She claims that Heyman made all kinds of excuses to defend Dreamer and made her feel horrible. After the show, Angel went to the hospital and she says that her private part is now permanently deformed because of the incident involving Tommy Dreamer. And up next we have Ron and Don Harris as Nazis.
that is sad.
Ron and Don Harris performed in many promotions like ECW, WCW,
Did they take that to the
and
police?
WWE. During their run in ECW though, the 2 brothers decided to get SS tattoos on their arms, and this meant that the brothers were openly neo-Nazis. When they showed up in ECW with these tattoos, they were very proud of them, but the ECW locker room didn't take too kindly to them. Their tattoos displeased Raven, Sandman, and New Jack, and they reported it to Paul Heyman, who fired the brothers from ECW. And up next we have Missy Hyatt causes a suicide. During her ECW days, Missy Hyatt allegedly went to a police station all hopped up on pain pills, claiming that she was lost. When a detective asked if she was on any type of medications, Hyatt apparently dumped the contents of her purse on a desk. In her purse were allegedly various pills, drug paraphernalia, and forged prescriptions. The detective asked Missy about the drugs, and she apparently reported a doctor for writing her numerous prescriptions. It was discovered the unnamed doctor in question had written her and other wrestlers over 2,000 phony prescriptions. Police went after this doctor, and the doctor allegedly committed suicide soon after he was discovered as the culprit. And up next we have Fan interrupts Rick Rude tribute. Ravishing Rick Rude had a brief stint in ECW in 1997, but just 2 years later he died of an overdose, and this shocked the wrestling world. Tributes poured in from all corners of the wrestling industry, and ECW held a 10-bell salute to honor Rick Rude. However, a fan in the front row, sitting next to his mom, interrupted this 10-bell salute, and he soon found out that that was a huge mistake. Bubba Ray Dudley proceeded to cuss the man and his mom out, and gave the man and his mom threats of violence. ECW owner Paul Heyman then marched down to the ring and gave the man and his mom their refund, and told them to get the F out of the arena.
The money too,
and so the fan and his mom were forced to leave by the security. And up next we have Disney almost bought 49% of ECW. According to Paul Heyman, Disney nearly bought into ECW, and this would have been something that would have helped the fledgling wrestling promotion get pay-per-view money and back on pay-per-view in general. ECW was having issues gaining pay-per-view deals after being compared to the controversial Ultimate Fighting Championship. Paul Heyman revealed that ECW almost had a 49% interest purchased by and a pay-per-view distribution scheme handled by Disney. Paul Heyman said that it was a very real discussion, and the negotiations were advanced up to a point where Disney were going to create a new subsidiary to run ECW pay-per-views. Paul Heyman said that it got all the way up to the vice chairman of Disney, but at the last second they declined because ECW was a little too non-Disney for Disney.
Facts.
And up next we have the death of Mike Awesome. Mike Awesome was a successful wrestler who competed all over the world, but one of his most notable runs in wrestling was when he was in ECW as the world champion. After his retirement in 2006, Awesome worked in real estate. Around the same time, his marriage to his wife began falling apart. One day in 2007, his wife told Awesome that she was leaving him. This apparently caught Mike Awesome completely by surprise, as he thought that the marriage was fine. The two argued, and Awesome allegedly grabbed his wife by her throat and threw her up against the wall. She wound up calling the police, and they arrested him on charges of domestic violence. While in jail, he called his wife, and she allegedly told him that she hated him and was divorcing him and taking their 2 children with her. Awesome returned home to find an empty house with much of their money and belongings all gone. Reports say that she also went as far to throw away and destroy some of his personal possessions. Completely despondent, Awesome committed suicide by hanging himself. He was just 42 years old. And up next we have the Type A Deathmatch. In the early days of ECW, some of the most violent matches took place, but no other match was crazier than the Type A deathmatch between Axel and Ian Rotten. They were a tag team known as the Bad Breed, but after losing a match to the Pitbulls, the tag team was forced to break up. Their feud reached its apex at Hardcore Heaven 1995. They fought in a Type A deathmatch where both competitors dipped their taped fists up in glue and then glass. From there, they proceeded to beat and bludgeon one another with glass-covered fists. The brothers were so bloody that most of the pictures you'll find on the WWE website of this match are in black and white. This match served as a testament to the carnival-like nature of the wrestling industry, where the well-being of performers was sacrificed in the pursuit of
oh my dog, that is actually terrible.
Fame. Furthermore, it was evident that ECW had habituated its audience to violence, necessitating the creation of increasingly outlandish stipulations to outshine previous endeavors. And up next we have Leatherface. This Leatherface is not to be confused with the Leatherface who wrestled death matches in Japan. The Leatherface in question was an alleged ring rat, also known as a groupie, who attended many ECW and independent shows in the Northeast during the 1990s. According to former ECW star Danny Doring, he once witnessed Leatherface giving a number of ECW stars fellatio backstage while he watched. One of the reasons Doring didn't participate in the oral gratification was supposedly because she had a chipped tooth and continually cut the private parts of the wrestlers she was giving fellatio to with said tooth. The sinister minister James Mitchell also recalls a Leatherface story in which she was backstage and wanted Mitchell to play with her enormous boobs. While Mitchell was playing with her breasts, Mitchell accidentally fell backwards and fell off the stage and onto a gimmick table underneath. And up next we have Rocking Rebel. The Rocking Rebel, Chuck Williams, was trained by the Rock and Roll Express and competed in several promotions like ECW and WCW. Rocking Rebel would become a common face in early ECW, often competing in preliminary matches. The Rocking Rebel married his childhood sweetheart Stephanie, and the couple had twins. According to several reports, the marriage was an abusive one, with the Rocking Rebel very domineering and controlling. Fed up with her wrestler husband's abuse, his wife filed an order of protection against him. However, on June 1st, 2018, the Rocking Rebel shot his wife twice in the chest and once in the head. He then turned the gun on himself and took his own life. The bodies of the Rocking Rebel and his wife were then discovered by their 10-year-old twins the next morning. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please check out other videos. And
hope you guys enjoyed this long video, man. You guys want more videos like this, make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.